Hey guys, welcome back for another thought for the day. So, we are on part 9 of Oil from the Last Dance. And so today we're going to deal with cult classic. And so, cult classic is really a person or something that, or even a place that we hold with high admiration, high esteem, of high reverence, and we usually do it because of the transformative power that it has or because of the standard of excellence that it calls things to. And a lot of times we see cult classic applied to a movie or a television show or something of that nature. But we know based off of that definition that Michael Jordan was a cult classic. He was someone who transformed the game of basketball. He was someone who held and has a standard of excellence on the court that players, like you hold players up against Michael Jordan. And so with that, there really is this importance for us to consider what that means, because when we look at the documentary, we see this whole piece where they talk about how there was this whole chant, commercial, and video that said, "I want to be like Mike." And I remember that chant as a kid. I remember the commercial. I remember like it was a thing. Like everybody wanted to be like Mike. And as I thought about it and as I sat with the documentary and thought about our journey in life, I realized how detrimental that was. And it's detrimental because it is idolatry. So, idolatry is, again, the reverence, the admiration, the love, and the reverence for something or someone above the true God, right? And so it is making something more important than the God we serve. And I thought to myself, how many kids, how many people said, "I want to be like Mike"? Did they still did they still make the same reverence and expression and say, "I want to be like Christ"? Right? And I say that because Christ should be and is our highest example and standard of life. He studied well, he pushed himself, he pushed the people that he was a part of, he mentored his people, he laid standard for them. He did things that I've talked about on this journey, right? And so if on this journey Christ has done all of these things. He's been a mentor. He's been a counselor. He's had great mentality. He was clear about his identity. He was clear about his assignment, right? Like he is shaped out. He's dealt with all of these things. He's had disciplines, right? Like he's met all of these standards. Do we honor him, one, as a cult classic, right? Because he's done all of these things. And is he the only cult classic you need? Because Christ should be the only cult classic you need. But if you need more, right, because I want to be like Mike, then we ventured into this thing called idolatry. And I want to tell you that Exodus chapter 20, verse 3 tells us that you must not have any other God before me, right? So God makes that declaration to the Israelites that they shouldn't have any other God before God. And so in that, what are we putting before God in our lives? What are we sitting and dealing with? And so we have to ask ourselves that question. What thing, what person, what place are we placing and providing preeminence before God? We are giving more attention, more just authority and space before God, right? So in nothing that you are doing should there be this them before God, right? And I'll use, for example, I should never open up my TV to sit and watch television before I've read my word, before I've said thank you to God for waking me up. My pastor used to say, I will not, he was like, I never ate. He was like, I wouldn't eat breakfast before I read my word because I would not, he was like, you don't reverence your food before you reverence God, right? Like, so there is this thing where like anything and everything can be idolatry, right? So your food can be idolatry, your TV watching can be idolatry, you going on social media can be idolatry, your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your kids, even your pastor. These are these things where we can practice idolatry, and we got to be very, very careful as we walk out our lives not to engage in this, and to know that idolatry is in our world, but we can't give into it. And 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and 7 tells us that. It says, do not be idolaters as some of them are, right? Like, so we don't want to do these things just because society is saying them. Learn in your personal space to take stock of the things, the places, and the people that you are placing above Christ, above God, and figure out how to revert back from that. And one of the ways to do that is to ask yourself, why am I placing them above God? What is the image? What is the thing that I'm trying to obtain from this, right? So a lot of times we will place, let's just use, for example, food. We will place food before God. We will, oh, I'm always worried about what I'm going to eat, what I'm going to do this. I never want to fast because food is more important. And this is a hard practice, but it is to ask yourself, why is food more important to you? Ask yourself, why is television more important to you than spending a moment in quietness, 30 minutes in quietness, just reading your Bible? Why is looking at your phone for 15 minutes more important than spending 15 minutes in prayer with God? A lot of it has to do with the fact that you feel that these things are immediate fillers and satisfiers that you are desiring from God, or you need from God, really, but you're not getting them. So we have to ask ourselves, what are we looking to obtain from these things that we're placing as idols? Because if we are using these things as fillers, then we can allow or ask God to be closer to us in those moments, right? So if I'm hungry and like ask myself, am I hungry for you, God? Right? And so, transforming those thoughts. And so the other thing is that 1 Corinthians 10:14 tells us, therefore, my dear friends, flee from idolatry. So don't keep doing this. If you've identified that you have some idols in your life, if you've identified why are these things, why are these places, why these people are idolatry for you, you need to really ask yourself, and not really ask yourself, but ask God, how do I flee from idolatry? How do I get rid of this? And this means that you're going to have to take some action steps. You're going to have to take some action steps. But you got to ask yourself, ask God, how do I flee from idolatry? And he'll give you the directive. I know for me, one of my biggest struggles is television. It is something that is ingrained in me. It is something that numbs me out. It doesn't allow for me to feel, for most people, they'll tell you television does that for them. And I remember coming to a place of saying, I'm gonna cut my cable. And I will say it was one of the most freeing situations. It has put me, now it doesn't mean that I don't have access to, to watch television, because I do. I have Hulu and things like that. But it freed me up. It freed me up from sitting there saying, I'm gonna allow for this television to numb an emotion, a feeling, a thought that I'm having, and for me to really get and have to deal with God and deal with myself about the emotion that I was feeling, and allow for me to spend time in word and in prayer for God to meet those needs. So know that there's a freeing that comes from this, but my plea is to you is to not allow for cult classics that are not Christ to run your life, and to set you and put you in a box where you're not being and feeling the full establishment of who Christ is and what Christ can do for you.